gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to a new edition of Political Smackdown. We're getting started early because it is ACC basketball season. Not that it matters for those of us that pull for Clemson. Got most of our regular crowd here, but Mr. Harris, welcome back.
Thank you.
Andy's the one that always talks about pornography, but you've got it splattered all over your shirt today.
Listen to it.
Geez, thanks, Wes.
That's pretty good.
And with that, can we go home?
I wish I'd decided I'd hold up a 9.9. That's a good answer.
Well, speaking of dirty language, between the State of the Union and the recently released budget from the president, we have a pretty good idea of what 4 more years under Joe Biden will look like. That, coupled with the earmarks in the latest Senate spending bill, because of course Congress will not approve a budget, make it obvious that runaway spending is here to stay. The president's solution is to spend more and make the wealthy pay their fair share, whatever that is. But if the government took every dollar held by all of the billionaires in the nation, we would not be able to fund government for a year, and we'd have no billionaires left to tax. The simple fact is that the middle class will have to pay the bills, and that can only be done if we slow the growth of government. Andy, talk to us a little bit. You've been through the budgeting process for the state. It's ugly. It's making sausage.
Yep.
But are the plan presented by the president and this Senate plan what we need? How are we going to get this under control?
Well, there's one good thing that come out of taxing all the billionaires into oblivion. Maybe we finally get rid of David Tepper at Panthers. That would be, I think we could all agree on that one.
On a sports kick today.
It is the season. Yeah, I mean, anytime you get into this, when a president or a governor sends their budget over to the legislative side, it's not going to look anything like that when they're done. I mean, it's more than anything, it's just they're fulfilling their constitutional obligation to send it over. And then the legislators say, thank you, sir, we will get back to you. And then 6 months later, 8 months, or sometime in Congress, seems like if never, they'll finally get something hammered out, and it will look nothing like this. I mean, and I've talked to several people around, just know average voters out there, and people seem to be, it's surprising to me, this thing about Ukraine and the support we're giving them it's starting really to lose some steam, even though the ones I've talked to have always been staunchly anti-Russian. And that has been our doctrine since Truman. Every president, Democrat, Republican, whatever, that has always been is that we have to stop the spread of communism. Well, you know, what is old is new again, so to speak, and we're back to that. I think that we have to make a decision about what we really truly believe as a nation. Do we really want to stop this aggressive act that was uncalled for, that was nothing was the cause of it other than Putin wanted to take over Ukraine that he thinks is a part of the former Soviet Union. And the people of Ukraine I really thought the thing would be over in a month. And they have fought the valiant fight. I mean, who would have thought 2 years later
They carried the water.
it'd still be going. And the Russian army just stymied for it. Everybody's running out of ammunition on both sides now. So, I mean, I don't know what's going to go, but that's going to be, to me, seems to be the big snag that a lot of people have, that President Biden did have quite a sizable amount of money that was be going to the Ukraine. And it just seems like that's a split within the Republican Party that has really started to turn into something I didn't see coming. Well, and it's going to be in the budget. So.
The reality, the amount of money they're talking about for Ukraine is a rounding error compared to the size of the budget. Mr. Harris, for next year, Biden's asked for Congress to spend $7.3 trillion when the government will only collect $1.5 trillion. The 10-year window covered, revenues would be $70 trillion, but the budget would be $86 trillion.
The deficit,
Even Democrats surely can understand we can't continue down this path.
the deficit will continue to grow if Biden is elected. The deficit will continue to grow if Trump is elected.
By a lower amount.
Well, we'll
You
see.
say tomato, I say tomato,
Yeah.
it's still bad, any
You know,
way you
that-
cut it.
When we look at billionaires, poor, bless their heart, billionaires, they need all the help they can get, I guess. But Biden's budget would raise taxes on not just the wealthy, not looking at that, but the ultra wealthy and large corporation. It will trim the deficit by $3 trillion over 10 years. It's going to lower the
Whoa,
price
whoa,
of
whoa,
prescription
no,
drugs
no.
and child care.
No.
It's going to boost defense spending. I can certainly see why Republicans will be opposed to that budget.
It doesn't trim the budget by $3 trillion. It increases it by less than the current projected amount by $3 trillion. It doesn't reduce anything. It's still at a deficit. Mike, the president says,
Well, he's a Democrat. You can't expect him to understand that.
well, I know it's math.
Unlike the Trump deficit that did the opposite, is that what we're arguing?
I'm not arguing the Republicans have it right.
Gotcha.
Goodness knows we don't.
Well,
Mike,
somebody killed all the deficit hawks somewhere. I mean, there used to be some.
There
and
used to
they're
be some.
and
don't you
they're-
miss Phil Graham?
They all died out.
I'll have to think of that.
Mike, the president says no increases on anybody over $400,000 or less than $400,000 of income. Social Security kept earnings at $168,000. We're going to have to address Social Security at some point, and the president has suggested this may be where some of that comes from.
Neither party's going to really address Social Security because all the people over 65 vote, more so than anybody else. The 60s, 70s, and 80s voted more in our election, even into the low 80s in our recent election in North Carolina than any other group. They vote, so that's going to be tough because a lot of them really
And that's
depend
not a
on
new
that.
phenomena.
Yeah, that's nothing new. It's just growing because the baby boomers are all retired and about to retire.
But the thing of it is, Mike, everybody is so messed up on Social Security. It was not ever meant to live on.
No.
It was never.
Let's just look
and it has become that.
Talk about some things I think are not good for business that are in the budget. He wants to raise the corporate tax rate, which was reduced from 28 to 21% by the Trump administration in 2017. He wants to raise that back to 28%. That's how he's getting part of that. I don't know that Democrats will ever understand, Andy, that corporations don't pay taxes, they collect them. And it's just, you're going to either get it from the individuals when they pay out the dividends, or they're not going to have the money to pay out the dividends and you get it from them. It's going to have a net impact of zero. It's just a matter of where you get it. It makes people feel good sometimes if they think they're taxing the rich, and the rich own big corporations. That's the way people look at it. More importantly to me is tax receipts will reach 18.7% of the economy. In other words, the amount of taxes that they bring in will be 18% as much as what the whole economy is in trillions of dollars. And they'll keep rising some. And in 1974 to 23, the average was 17.3. But Biden is proposing 4.9 trillion in net tax increases, mostly on business and those, as he says, making over $400,000 a year. I don't know if y'all thought about this, but the inflation we've had in the 3.5 years almost now that Biden's been in office is 12 or 14%. So the 400,000 when he started saying that now would be nearly 480,000 now, but it's not indexed for inflation in the way he looks at it. So it's just, I just don't see that it'll go anywhere. And another thing that's disturbing is when Medicare was started in 65,
65, Lyndon Johnson.
if I remember correctly, defense spending was between 15 and 20% of the budget or more. Today, according to Biden's budget, it'll only be 3.1%, and what he proposes to raise defense spending is less than the rate of inflation, which is a real decrease in spending. But defense is supposed to be the number one function of the federal government.
But in 1965, we were in the middle of the Vietnam War. that's going to skew your defense spending numbers a little bit.
But what's happened is we're in the middle of something all the time, Roger, and inflation is a whole lot worse. But we have so greatly made the, quote, safety net so broad and so big, there's no way to get back to where we have a reasonably good amount, even if it was 10% of the budget today.
Well, the problem too you got, Mike, is, and we've had this conversation about food stamps. Do you really think General Mills wants you to do away with food stamps, or Frito-Lay, or Pillsbury, or Campbell Soup? I mean, let's face it, there are people that are making their livelihood off of this safety net, so to speak, in all ways that come. I mean, you name it. I mean, it just is.
The bottom line of all this, Wes, is we don't know when it's going to be, but this can't be sustained forever.
No.
Many people never thought it would get sustained this long, with inflation no worse than even it's been the last few years. But one day, confidence in the dollar will go away, and dollar-denominated investments will see a crash like you have never seen before. It's just a matter of when, not if.
And we will lose the status as the reserve currency, and that's going to be the beginning, if not the end of that. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't look like Washington, it doesn't really matter which party is going to ever deal with this. The reality is, in just a few years, Social Security will receive an automatic 25% reduction across the board. And if politicians aren't willing to take this up, we're all going to be impacted by that.
Whichever ones do lose the next election, that's
Better
the problem.
believe it.
They will. They will. Third rail of politics. Well, for a century, the election boards in North Carolina have been made up by members recommended by the two major parties and appointed by the governor, with the party of the governor holding the majority on each election board. Last year, the General Assembly voted to change that, creating an 8-person state board with even numbers from each party. Last Friday, a 3-judge panel made up of 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat unanimously sided with the governor, who said the new law took away his appointment powers. 2 questions, Mr. Harris. Does the General Assembly have the authority to change how boards are selected? And secondly, would a fully bipartisan election board better oversee the elections process, as it seems to in some states?
I think the important part of your lead in there was, this is how we have done it for 100 years. It's been this way for before we were born, before my parents were born. It's been that way for that long. There are 3 branches of government. There's a reason we had 3 branches of government, so that they got to check on each other. This is certainly a power grab by the GOP legislature to take more power away from the governor, and arguably the North Carolina governor, compared to the other governors in other states, is among the weakest in the nation. And we're taking away more power for him. It's been turned away by court rulings. There was even an attempt at a constitutional amendment in 2018, and even the voters said, no, we don't want to see it done that way. The Republican State Election Board would split it 4-4, which is obviously going to lead to a lot more ties. And then how are you going to break the ties on those important votes? What's the General Assembly say? Wait for it. The General Assembly will break those ties. So that's an ultimate power grab from the beginning and from the end.
Mike, that may be a power grab. I'll grant that, but does the General Assembly have that authority? And would a bipartisan board be better than one run by the, I'm not going to say political machine, but the governor's office, be it Republican or Democrat?
I may disappoint you, Wes, but I doubt it. I just don't know that you can have evenly divided boards in some kind of convoluted way of going all the way to the General Assembly to decide if it's done. I will say this, though. It's not a done deal. 2 Republican judges ruled against the General Assembly this week, along with 1 Democrat. I don't think they had a choice, because the precedent is that when it first happened during
McCrory's administration,
the Supreme Court, that was a majority Democrat court, it was 4-3 majority, but it was 6-1 against this very same type of thing. So we have a Supreme Court precedent. I don't think the 3-judge panel or the appeals court has any choice. I think only the state Supreme Court can reverse a prior Supreme Court precedent. What's that number? Word? Stare decisis. Is it stare decisis or not?
or a constitutional amendment could reverse it.
That's true. And so I just don't know what the answer is. I get the problem and they want fairness, and in an ideal world, that'd be great if people would work together, but in the state of politics and current state, I think there'd be more 2-to-2 ties at the local level and more 4-to-4 ties at the state level than we care to think about.
Well, Andy, if you can hit this quickly, we'll get you before break. If not, we'll come back and let you wrap it up.
It ain't gonna take me but a second.
All right.
I think we've seen that the 3-judge panel did the right thing. It was very obvious they all concluded that the General Assembly was out of control.
Just one quick point. Does the Newby court, when Newby would have let it happen the first time, do at least 3 of those 4 Republicans now agree with Newby? That'll, if you know the answer to that, you'll know whether it stands like it is or changes.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch. No doubt it will get there. Whether or not this is the perfect thing to do, I do think the General Assembly has the authority, and again, it's closer to the people. The closer these decisions are to the people, the better off we the people are. We'll be right back after this message.
Chef Paul Prudhomme once said, "You don't need a silver fork to eat good food." Well, on Cleveland County Kitchen, we don't have a silver fork, but we sure do serve up lots of good food. Hi, I'm Deborah Blanton. I hope you'll join me for the next Cleveland County Kitchen. Each month, we offer a complete farm-to-table experience. We visit local growers, we learn about nutrition, and wrap things up with wonderful meals prepared by our guest chefs. It's a lot of fun. I hope you'll join me for the next Cleveland County Kitchen.
Welcome back. After going all the way through the North Carolina Supreme Court and an election with no problems under the new law, a federal judge and an Obama appointee has said that she would hold a bench trial, which means no jury, to determine if the voter ID law passed by the people of North Carolina was impermissibly motivated by discriminatory intent. Andy, you've written more laws than anybody at this table. Does every law come down to a series of state and then federal courts before it's ultimately enacted? Is that where we are as a society today?
Unfortunately, it is. I mean, used to be, you didn't have so many sore heads running loose around, and they take offense at everything coming and going, and if they can't win, by God, they're going to fight you by another means, and that's just where it's coming. Personally, I thought voter ID worked pretty smooth. I really didn't hear anybody had a problem voting. You know, it's just sometimes, you know, you're always going to have somebody that maybe is not real sure about where their precinct is and that sort of thing. And some people forget that in a primary, if you're registered one way or the other, you can't vote in other persons, but if you're unaffiliated, you can. And a lot of people, that was some confusion with that with a few people that really wanted to vote on that school board race. But, you know.
But it had nothing to do with ID.
It had nothing to do with ID.
No, it had nothing to do with ID. No. I think that General Assembly finally got this about as easy as it can be. And to give people a certain concern they seem to have about the way the ballots are handled and all that, and who's there and who's not, who should be and who shouldn't, I think we've got it as good as we're going to be able to get it.
Well, Mike, we're talking about potential General Assembly overreach. Is this overreach by the judicial branch, or is this the path that all of these laws seem to need to take?
Well, Loretta Biggs is the wrong judge to have it, for starters. The law was passed in 2018, just weeks after the voters approved the constitutional, saying they wanted one by constitution.
Overwhelmingly.
Yeah, and days, Wes, before the Republicans lost their supermajority to Cooper for those 2 years. And that was a big issue, if y'all remember. And Loretta Biggs got it, and she would not let Berger and Tim Moore be involved in the case. She got overruled on that ultimately by the Supreme Court. She gave an injunction. She got overruled by the Court of Appeals federally over that. In the meantime, the Supreme Court of North Carolina said it was unconstitutional under the Constitution. So it was just hanging out there, not active. And then when the new Supreme Court said it was constitutional and reversed the old Supreme Court in North Carolina, now she's picked it back up. She will rule that it's out again. She will get overridden again. And then that'll finally be the end of it. I'd bet a lot of money on both of those.
Well, Mr. Harris, you spent a big part of your career discussing in part with students separation of power.
Yes.
Is this an overreach like was suggested with the General Assembly on the
I don't know. It does seem to be a reach. I agree. It seems to be a reach. And I'm like Andy. I've come to peace with the voter ID law. This is a 5-year-old case. The trial is set for May. There are some details I think the General Assembly needs to work out with the voter ID. A student ID from Cleveland Community College is considered valid. A student ID from Gardner-Webb is not. An employee ID card from Durham County, if you're a government employee there, that is valid. An employee ID card from Cleveland County government is not. A student ID from Isothermal is acceptable. A student ID from Gaston College is not. Most of us use a driver's license whenever we go vote. That's our usual ID. That's good unless it's expired, and then it's not good, unless you're over 65, and then the expired driver's license is valid. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff I think that need to be worked on. But the reality is that this solved a problem that didn't exist in the first place. There are 7.5 million registered voters in North Carolina, and in the last 5 years, there have been 7 reports of voters trying to impersonate another voter. That's not 7,000 or 700, a total of 7. I did the math. That is 0.0000009%. This thing may not keep a whole lot of people from voting, but it's about as useful as a condom machine in the Vatican.
That may be more useful than it was 50 years ago.
Now, you notice, Wes, I had said a word.
I thought it was my turn this week.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for that, Mr. Harris. We're going to move along. I found it interesting this week that the military establishment, which like every other government department claims it needs more money, has found over $300 million in savings that can be diverted to Ukraine, even though Congress has yet to pass a resolution to continue that support. U.S. support has been overwhelming compared to other countries. I think we've got a chart of that. Andy, real quick before we get to the lightning round, what are your thoughts on that? Pentagon finds $300 million to keep this support going. You indicated your support for it in general.
Well, and it is because that has been our foreign policy since World War II. You know, you can find money anywhere. I've been around government long enough, involved in it. Everybody can find a pot of money. Oh, look what we found in the back closet over there.
And I can tell you, even county and city managers have a little bit hid here and there that they can use that their board hadn't figured out where they got it.
That's exactly right.
And a good school principal.
And that's just how that is. I'm not surprised. I mean, it's nothing nefarious by no means. It's already money been appropriated, but just not been used. So,
Mr. Harris, thoughts on?
I don't like it. I don't like it. It's wrong. In 2019, whenever Donald Trump diverted $3.6 billion in military construction funding to build a border wall that was supposed to be paid for by Mexico in the first place, it was wrong then. It's wrong now.
I hate to admit it, but that's twice today you've been right. Won't mention the other one.
All right.
Mike, Ukraine.
Well, number one, it's a rounding error. 300 million won't go far in the Ukrainian war.
Correct.
But it's just an attempt by Biden to try to give them something while he's still arguing with Congress, and he's got the Republicans to the point they're not going to do what he wants to do on Ukraine till he does what they want to do on the border. It's going to be a problem funding Ukraine the rest of this year.
And President Zelensky told CNN this week that Ukraine will not win the war without continued U.S. support.
And you saw on that chart Wes had how much of the support they've got has come from the U.S. It's almost all of it.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a proxy war for us. We're going to move on to the lightning round. Mike, get us started.
Well, Andy and I had the privilege this week of hearing our new county manager do what I thought was a good presentation. Well, Andy, buried in that was something that you may have picked up on, but I don't think many people did. Since the 2020 reevaluation of real estate and property values, there's been an 18.8% increase over the 4 years, which is an average of 4.7% increase. So next year when we have the reval, if your property is exactly what that was, and they reduce the rate to what's called revenue neutral, but it's not, your property taxes would go up 4.7% because that's what they're allowed to do and call it revenue neutral.
That's the usual shell game that goes on county level every revow. I saw it too.
All right, Andy, what have you got for us?
Well, it's something I came across this morning that shocked me really. Of the 6 million homeowners in the United States, now this is single family homes, 7%, a little over 7%, do not have homeowners insurance. The biggest investment that the average person makes, and it's paid off, it's in their name, nobody else owes money on it, it's paid off, and they do not have homeowners. That is insane to me. Home insurance is not that much more expensive than it does to replace that house.
Yeah. Well, you can tell these two are realtors. What have you got, Mr. Harris?
I've got something different. Baptist Children's Home of North Carolina is expanding its ministry into Cleveland County. River Hill Refuge will open in a few weeks on property that belonged to Wes Westmoreland's father, Dr. Ted Westmoreland. River Hill Refuge will transform lives of children that have been victims of circumstances that is almost beyond belief. These children will have a haven, safe from trauma, and they're going to learn about the love of Christ and hope that enters their lives. And Wes Westmoreland and his brother Jay have united to reach out to children in pain that are in pain in a real and tangible way. Matthew 19:14 said, Jesus said, let the little children come to me. Wes and Jay, thank you for putting feet to Jesus' command.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Harris.
Now beat that one.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to sign off here and be done. I will say the dedication, yes, sir, is April 27th, riverhillrefuge.org, if anybody would like to come be a part of that dedication.
Got my card this morning.
Good,
Yep.
good. Now, during COVID, many folks, including then President Trump, as well as some on this show, decried Sweden's laissez-faire approach to COVID. You remember that, don't you, Mike?
I do.
A new study now shows that Sweden's approach led to the lowest death toll in Europe. Lockdowns were not effective, and the trade-off we see in demanding that government do something led to significant learning loss and an increase in mortality. Allowing people to make their own decisions is always the best approach to a free society. Today, as we watch the news nearly every night, we see the same mantra about climate change. Follow the science, we're told. But like Sweden, we should allow people through the marketplace to make decisions, or we're destined for a similar outcome, just on a different issue. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week on another edition of Political Smackdown.